The wind howled across the frozen surface of Kale, seven like a living thing, hungry and merciless. Snow fell in thick curtains that erased the world beyond a few meters, turning everything into a white void where up and down lost all meaning. In this desolation, huddled against a broken piece of hull metal that had once been part of an evacuation shuttle, Lyria held her daughter close to her chest. Neva was so small. Only 4 cycles old, barely understanding what was happening. Her delicate silver skin had already taken on the blue-gray tint of severe cold, and her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. The Seraph were a beautiful people, elegant and refined, their bodies designed for the temperate gardens of their homeworld. They were not meant for places like this. They were not built to survive. Lyria felt the cold creeping deeper into her own limbs. Her left side was soaked with blood from where a piece of metal had torn through her abdomen during the crash. She had tried to stop the bleeding with strips of her clothing, but the fabric was frozen now, stiff against her skin. The pain had faded to a distant numbness, which she knew was not a good sign. The medical training she had received years ago told her exactly what that meant. She had perhaps an hour left. Maybe less. Neva had even less time than that. There had been others on the shuttle. 23 Seraph refugees fleeing the border conflicts in the outer spiral. The ship had taken damage from debris, its navigation systems failing as it attempted an emergency landing on this frozen moon. Lyria remembered the terrible grinding sound of metal tearing apart, the screams of her people, the violent impact that threw her against the bulkhead. When she had crawled from the wreckage with Neva in her arms, she had found the others scattered across the ice. Some had died on impact. Others had wandered into the storm, disoriented, and were likely dead now too. She had tried to activate the emergency beacon. Had tried to build some kind of shelter. Had tried to keep moving to generate warmth. But her injury was too severe, the cold too intense, and Neva too young to understand that she needed to keep fighting. So Lyria had stopped trying. She had made peace with it. In their culture there was a saying, "The stars give and the stars take away. We return to the light from which we came." She had accepted this truth. Accepted that this frozen moon would be their resting place. But she would not let her daughter die in fear. Lyria's voice cracked as she sang, the ancient seraph lullaby that her own mother had sung to her, and her mother before that, stretching back through countless generations. The words spoke of home, of warm gardens and gentle rains, of safety and love that transcended even death. Neva's eyes fluttered open occasionally, focusing on her mother's face, and Lyria smiled through her tears. "Sleep now, little star," she whispered between verses. "Sleep and dream of home. We will see the gardens again, you and I. We will walk among the silver trees where it is always warm and the sky is always kind." Neva's small hand gripped her mother's finger with what little strength remained. Lyria closed her eyes and sang, her voice growing weaker with each line. This was how it would end then. Not so terrible really. They would simply drift away together, from cold to sleep to something beyond. The galaxy would spin on without them. The stars would not notice 2 more lights going dark. She was halfway through the 4th verse when she heard it. Footsteps. Not the light, careful steps of a seraph, or the clicking tread of a Verilyn, or the slithering approach of a Thane. These were heavy footsteps, crunching through the snow with a steady, purposeful rhythm. Something large moving through the storm without hesitation. Lyria's eyes snapped open. Her survival instincts, which she thought she had put aside, suddenly screamed warnings. There were predators on some frozen worlds. Scavengers that hunted by sound and heat signature. Perhaps death would not be peaceful after all. She clutched Neva tighter, trying to make herself smaller against the hull fragment. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. A shadow appeared in the swirling white, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with mechanical certainty through conditions that should have been impossible to navigate. Then the figure emerged from the storm. A human. Lyria stared in complete shock. It made no sense. Humans were a minor species, barely established in this sector of space. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century, and their presence in the outer spiral was minimal at best. They were considered fragile by most galactic standards, their homeworld a moderate environment that produced beings ill-suited for extremes. Yet here stood a human, dressed in weather gear that looked inadequate for the conditions, his face partially obscured by a breathing mask and protective goggles. He carried equipment on his back, and in his hands was some kind of scanning device that pulsed with soft blue light. The human stopped 3 meters away, the scanner still pointed in her direction. Then he lowered it and moved closer, his movements careful but not fearful. "Contact established," he said, his voice muffled by the mask but clear enough. He was speaking standard galactic common with a thick human accent. 2 life signs, both critical. Sarah, physiology confirmed. Initiating emergency protocol. Lyria tried to speak but only managed a weak sound. The human knelt beside her, and she could see his eyes now through the goggles, brown and intense, focused with the kind of concentration she had seen in combat medics during the war. "My name is Philip Grant," the human said, already pulling equipment from his pack. "I'm a salvage worker operating in this sector. My thermal scanner picked up your signatures from about 2 kilometers out. Can you understand me?" Lyria managed a small nod. "Good. I need you to stay conscious. Can you tell me your names?" "Lyria," she whispered. "My daughter. Neva." Philip was already working, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he unfolded an emergency thermal blanket. "All right, Lyria. I'm going to help you and Neva. The storm makes evacuation impossible right now, but I've activated an emergency beacon. Medical ships will reach us by dawn." Dawn was hours away. Lyria knew she did not have hours. But as Philip Grant wrapped the thermal blanket around both of them and began setting up portable heating units, as he checked Neva's vital signs with a gentleness that surprised her, as he moved through the killing storm as if it were nothing more than a mild inconvenience, Lyria felt something she had not expected to feel again. A small, fragile spark of hope. The human worked on, unfazed by the wind that should have frozen him solid, undeterred by the hopelessness of the situation. And Lyria, watching him through fading vision, wondered what kind of species this was, that could walk through death itself and still reach out a hand to pull others back from the edge. Philip worked with a speed that seemed impossible in the freezing conditions. His gloved hands moved from one piece of equipment to another, assembling what looked like a portable medical station right there in the snow. Lyria watched through dimming vision as he pulled out heating pads, medical scanners, injection devices, and pouches of clear liquid that she recognized as basic metabolic stabilizers. "Neva first," Philip said, more to himself than to Lyria. "Always treat the child first." He gently lifted Neva from Lyria's arms, and the mother felt a surge of panic despite her weakness. But Philip's movements were careful, professional. He laid the small girl on an insulated mat he had spread across the snow, then immediately began wrapping heating pads around her tiny limbs. "Core temperature is dangerously low," he muttered, checking a handheld scanner. "But her heart is still strong. That's good. Children are fighters." He pressed an injector against Neva's neck. There was a soft hiss, and the device delivered its contents directly into her bloodstream. Within seconds, Lyria saw color beginning to return to her daughter's face. The blue-gray tint started to fade, replaced by a healthier silver tone. Philip covered Neva completely with a thermal blanket, then positioned 2 portable heaters on either side of her. "She'll stabilize," he said, finally turning his full attention to Lyria. "Now let's deal with you." "No," Lyria whispered. "Save your supplies. I'm already gone." Philip ignored her completely. He was already scanning her injuries, his scanner painting her torso in shades of red and orange on his display. His expression darkened when he saw the extent of the internal damage. "You have a torn abdominal artery," he said calmly. "Significant blood loss. Internal bleeding. 3 fractured ribs, one of which has punctured your left lung." He set down the scanner and met her eyes. "You're right. By most medical standards, you should already be dead." "Then why waste your time?" Lyria asked. "You cannot stop this." "Protocol says I try anyway," Philip replied. He was already pulling out surgical supplies, laying them out on a sterilized sheet. "I've seen people survive worse. Not often, but it happens. And until you actually stop breathing, my job is to keep you alive." "This is not logical," Lyria protested weakly. "Your resources are limited. The rescue ship is hours away. I will not survive that long." Philip looked at her as he prepared an injection. "You're probably right. The odds are against you. But here's the thing about humans, we're really bad at accepting impossible odds." He pressed the injector against her arm. "This is a combat stimulant. It'll keep your heart going and dull the pain. It's going to hurt when it kicks in, but it means you're still alive to feel it." The medication flooded through Lyria's system like fire. She gasped, her body suddenly alert in a way it had not been for the past hour. The numbness receded, replaced by sharp awareness of every injury. It was agony, but Philip was right. It meant she was still alive. "Good," Philip said, watching her vital signs on his scanner. "Stay with me, Lyria. I need you conscious." He began working on her wounds, his movements precise despite the storm raging around them. He used a device to seal the external bleeding, then administered another injection directly into her abdomen. Synthetic clotting agent, he explained. It won't fix the internal damage, but it'll slow the bleeding enough to buy us time. Time for what? Lyria asked through gritted teeth. I am dying human. Your medicines only delay the inevitable. Maybe, Philip said. But I once treated a soldier who had been shot through both lungs and her liver. Medical scanner said she had minutes to live. I kept her alive for 6 hours until we reached a trauma center. She's still alive today, has 3 kids. He adjusted the position of a heating pad near Lyria's core. I treated a miner who was crushed under a tunnel collapse. Every bone in his left side was shattered. He walked again. Those are your people, Lyria said. Humans are known to be resilient. Seraph are not. We are fragile. Delicate. Fragile doesn't mean doomed, Philip replied. He was building a small shelter around them now, using pieces of the hull wreckage and a waterproof tarp from his pack. I've learned that every species has its own kind of strength. Your body might be delicate, but that doesn't mean it can't survive. The shelter took shape quickly, cutting the worst of the wind. Philip activated chemical heating packs and placed them strategically around the space, creating a pocket of warmth that felt miraculous after the killing cold outside. There was a case on Earth about 300 years ago, Philip said as he worked, before we had modern medicine. A woman was lost in a winter storm, trapped under snow for 17 hours in temperatures that should have killed her in minutes. When they found her, she had no pulse. No heartbeat. Frozen solid. He checked Neva's vital signs, satisfied with what he saw, then returned to monitoring Lyria. They thawed her slowly. Restarted her heart. She lived another 60 years. Why are you telling me this? Lyria asked. Because giving up is what kills people, Philip said quietly. I've seen it happen. 2 patients with identical injuries, one fights, one surrenders. The one who fights has a chance. The one who surrenders always dies. Always. Lyria closed her eyes. I was not surrendering. I was accepting reality. Same thing, Philip said. And I'm not going to let you do it. He pulled out a ration pack and broke off a piece of something that looked like compressed grain. Eat this. Your body needs fuel. I cannot. Eat it, Philip said firmly. Small bites. It'll help. Lyria took the food with a shaking hand and forced herself to chew. It tasted like nothing, but Philip was right. Her body needed fuel if it was going to keep fighting. Outside the shelter, the wind screamed. Inside, Philip continued his work with calm determination. He told her more stories as he monitored her vital signs, adjusted her medications, and reinforced their shelter against the storm. Stories of impossible survivals, of medical miracles, of people who lived when every rational prediction said they should have died. Lyria realized what he was doing. This was not just medical treatment. He was waging war against her acceptance of death. Every story was a weapon against her surrender. Every action was a declaration that her life was worth fighting for, even when logic said the fight was already lost. The rescue beacon is active, Philip said, showing her his communicator. Medical team will be here at dawn. 4 more hours. That's all we need. 4 hours is eternity when you are dying, Lyria whispered. Then we'll take it 1 minute at a time, Philip replied. He checked on Neva again and a small smile crossed his face. Look, your daughter is sleeping peacefully now. Her temperature is almost normal. She's going to be fine. Lyria looked at Neva's peaceful face and felt something shift inside her. Her daughter would survive. This strange human had saved her. Which meant Lyria had to survive too. Neva could not wake up without a mother. For the first time since the crash, Lyria began to fight. The storm grew worse as the hours passed. What had been a fierce blizzard became something truly monstrous, wind speeds increasing to the point where the howling became a constant roar. Snow did not fall anymore. It flew horizontally, slamming against their makeshift shelter with enough force to make the metal panels shudder. Philip checked his equipment display and frowned. Wind speeds hitting 200 kilometers per hour now. This is worse than the forecast predicted. Forecast? Lyria asked weakly. The stimulant he had given her was keeping her conscious, but every breath was still painful. I monitor weather patterns for my salvage work, Philip explained, adjusting one of the heating units near Neva. This storm was supposed to be bad, but not this bad. Kale 7's weather systems are unstable. They change fast. Then why are you here alone? Lyria asked. Why would anyone choose to work in such conditions? Philip was silent for a moment, securing one of the tarp edges that had come loose. I was a combat medic. Served in the Frontier Defense Corps for 12 years. Saw a lot of action during the Verulan conflicts. I have heard of those wars, Lyria said. They were brutal. They were, Philip agreed quietly. I treated hundreds of wounded. Lost count after a while. Some I saved. Some I couldn't. He paused, checking her vital signs on his scanner. After my service ended, I tried civilian life. Worked at a hospital on Europa Station for 2 years. But I couldn't handle it. Why not? Too many people. Too much noise. Too many emergencies happening all at once. Philip pulled out another heating pad from his pack and placed it near Lyria's feet. In combat medicine, you focus on one patient at a time. One crisis. You give everything you have to that moment. In a civilian hospital, there are always 10 more patients waiting. You never stop moving. Never stop deciding who gets treatment first and who has to wait. That is the nature of medical work, Lyria said. I know. But I couldn't turn off the combat medic part of my brain. The part that says every single person in front of you is the most important person in the universe for that moment. He smiled sadly. So I chose salvage work. Out here in the isolated sectors, I'm alone most of the time. Quiet. Peaceful. But I keep my medical certification active and my emergency gear ready, just in case. You cannot turn it off, Lyria said, understanding now. No, Philip admitted. I can't. A massive gust of wind slammed into their shelter, and one of the metal panels groaned dangerously. Philip immediately moved to reinforce it, using cables from his pack to tie it more securely to the hull wreckage. His hands worked quickly despite the cold that was seeping through their shelter's defenses. Lyria watched him and noticed something. You are giving your heating pads to us. You have none for yourself. I'll be fine, Philip said without looking back. Humans handle cold better than most people think. That is not what galactic medical data says, Lyria countered. Your species is rated for moderate temperature zones. This cold should be dangerous for you too. Should be, Philip agreed. But humans evolved in varied climates on Earth. We had ice ages. Our ancestors survived regions that would freeze other species solid. He finished securing the panel and returned to check on both patients. Besides, you and Neva need the heat more than I do. Basic triage. That is not triage, Lyria said. Triage is about allocating resources logically. You are risking your own survival to maintain ours. Any galactic medical protocol would say that is inefficient. Philip shrugged. Probably. But I stopped following protocols a long time ago when they didn't make sense. Another violent gust hit them, and this time Lyria heard a dangerous cracking sound above. She looked up and saw ice forming on the damaged hull section they were sheltering against. The weight was causing the metal to buckle. Philip saw it too. Without hesitation, he moved to position himself between the weakening structure and his patients. Stay still, he ordered. Don't move, Neva. What are you doing? Lyria asked, alarm cutting through her pain. That panel is going to collapse, Philip said calmly. When it does, I'll redirect it. Just stay where you are. You will be crushed. I've survived worse. The metal groaned again, a long tortured sound. Lyria watched in horror as the panel began to give way, tons of ice-covered wreckage starting to fall. Philip braced himself, arms raised, and when the panel fell he caught it with his shoulders, grunting with the effort. His legs bent under the weight but held firm. Move the heaters away from the edge, he said through gritted teeth. Don't want them damaged. Lyria, moving on pure instinct despite her injuries, reached out and pulled the heating units closer to herself and Neva. Philip held the panel for another few seconds, then with a massive effort shoved it sideways. The wreckage crashed into the snow beside their shelter instead of on top of them. Philip collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. His shoulder was bleeding. Lyria could see the tear in his jacket where the metal had cut through. You are injured, she said. Just a scratch, Philip replied, though his face was tight with pain. He pulled out a medical spray from his kit and treated the wound himself, sealing it quickly. Then he immediately went back to checking on Lyria and Neva as if nothing had happened. Why? Lyria asked quietly. Why do this? You do not know us. We are nothing to you. In galactic terms, saving 2 Seraph refugees is not worth risking a human life. We are not politically important. Not valuable resources. Just ordinary people. Philip met her eyes. That's exactly why you're worth saving. I do not understand. The galaxy runs on calculations, doesn't it? Philip said. Cost versus benefit. Resource allocation. Acceptable losses. I've seen how other species handle emergencies. They run the numbers. They decide who's worth the effort and who isn't. He adjusted Neva's blanket with gentle hands. Humans don't think like that. Or at least we're not supposed to. But it is logical, Lyria protested weakly. Resources are finite. Not everyone can be saved. Maybe, Philip said. But someone being illogical saved me once. During the war, I was trapped in a collapsed building after a bombing. My leg was pinned. The building was on fire. Every calculation said I was a lost cause. Getting me out would take too long, risk too many other lives. He smiled at the memory. But my squad leader didn't run the calculation. She just started digging. Took her and 2 others 40 minutes to pull me free. They could have died. By all logic, they should have left me. But they did not, Lyria said. No, they didn't. Because she told me later that she wasn't going to let a brother die if there was any chance at all to save him. Philip checked his chronometer. 3 more hours until rescue. We're going to make it, Lyria? All 3 of us. Because someone being unreasonable is exactly what this moment needs. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, a human who had every logical reason to save himself continued fighting for 2 strangers, burning through his supplies and his own safety for people the galaxy would call an inefficient use of resources. And Lyria, watching him work, began to understand that perhaps humanity's greatest strength was not their resilience or their adaptability. It was their refusal to be reasonable when reason demanded surrender. 2 hours before dawn, Lyria's vital signs began to crash. Philip's medical scanner flashed urgent red warnings, and he moved immediately to her side. His face remained calm, but Lyria could see the tension in his movements as he administered another dose of stabilizing medication. Heart rate dropping, he muttered, checking the readings. Blood pressure critical. He looked at his scanner again, then at Lyria, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt maybe. Or just exhaustion catching up with him. I am dying, Lyria whispered. We both know it. Your body thinks you're dying, Philip corrected. There's a difference. But even he sounded less certain now. He had been fighting for hours, burning through his medical supplies, and the numbers on his scanner told a story that was hard to argue with. Lyria felt herself drifting. The pain was distant now, which she knew was a bad sign. She could feel her consciousness starting to slip away like water running through her fingers. It would be easy to let go. So easy. Just close her eyes and drift into the dark. Lyria, Philip's voice cut through the fog. Stay with me. Don't you dare quit on me now. I am trying, she breathed. But I am so tired. Philip was quiet for a moment. Then he asked something unexpected. That song you were singing when I found you. The lullaby. Can you teach it to me? Lyria's eyes opened slightly. What? The lullaby, Philip repeated. For Neva. I want to learn it. Why? Because she's going to wake up soon, and if you're not conscious, someone should be able to sing it to her. Philip sat back waiting. Please. Teach me. It was such an odd request that it cut through Lyria's fog. She tried to focus, tried to remember the words her own mother had taught her. It is an old serif. You will not be able to pronounce it correctly. I'll do my best, Philip said. Please. So Lyria, using what little strength she had left, began to sing. Her voice was barely a whisper, cracking on every other word, but she pushed through. The lullaby was simple, only 8 lines, speaking of silver trees and gentle winds and the safety of home. Philip listened carefully, then tried to repeat the words. His pronunciation was terrible. The human mouth was not designed for the flowing tones of serif speech. The words came out harsh and broken, and under any other circumstance, it would have been almost comical. But there was something about hearing her people's most sacred song in this strange, rough voice that struck Lyria deeply. Philip struggled through the lines, stopping several times to ask her to repeat a phrase, working at it with the same determined focus he brought to everything else. When he finally made it through all 8 lines, he looked at Lyria. How was that? Terrible, Lyria said, and despite everything, she almost smiled. The worst I have ever heard. Good enough, Philip said. He turned to where Neva slept peacefully, her small chest rising and falling with steady breaths. And then, in his broken, harsh human accent, Philip began to sing the serif lullaby. It should have sounded wrong. It should have been an insult to her culture, to hear their most beautiful song butchered by an alien voice. But as Lyria listened to this human sing to her daughter, something inside her broke open. This man had no reason to be here. No reason to care. He could have passed by their dying signals and continued his salvage work. He could have called for rescue and left them to wait alone. He could have saved his supplies for himself and let nature take its course. Instead, he sat in a freezing storm, singing a lullaby in a language he did not know, to a child who was not his species, while fighting to save a woman every medical scan said was already lost. It was absurd, illogical, completely unreasonable. And it was the most beautiful thing Lyria had ever witnessed. Tears rolled down her face, freezing on her cheeks. Philip noticed and paused in his singing. Did I mess it up that badly? No, Lyria whispered. No, you did perfectly. She took a shaking breath, feeling something rekindling inside her. Keep singing. Philip continued, and with each broken word, Lyria felt herself being pulled back from the edge. Not because the song had magical healing power, but because she suddenly understood what Philip had been trying to tell her all along. Giving up was a choice. Fighting was a choice. And hearing her daughter's lullaby sung by this impossible human who refused to quit, Lyria made her choice. She would fight. Tell me about your people, she said when Philip finished the song. Tell me why humans are like this. Philip checked her vital signs and seemed satisfied that she was more alert. Like what? Unreasonable. Stubborn. Refusing to accept reality. Philip thought about this while he adjusted her heating pads. We almost destroyed ourselves once. Did you know that? About 400 years ago, we nearly made Earth uninhabitable. Wars, pollution, climate collapse. We were on the edge of extinction. I had heard stories, Lyria said. We could have given up then. Accepted that we had ruined everything and just waited for the end. Philip pulled out a ration bar and took a bite, then offered some to Lyria. She shook her head, but he insisted until she ate a small piece. But humans don't give up. Even when we should. We rebuilt. Changed our ways. Fought our way back from the brink. It took 200 years, but we did it. That is admirable, Lyria said. It's also stupid, Philip admitted. We lost so much that we never should have put at risk in the first place. If we had been smarter, more logical, we would have avoided the crisis entirely. He smiled slightly. But we're not smart or logical. We're the species that nearly kills itself, then refuses to die. We fail, then get back up. We lose everything, then build it again. You do not know when to quit, Lyria repeated his earlier words. Exactly, Philip said. Sometimes that's stupid. We waste resources on lost causes. We take risks that don't make sense. We fight battles we can't win. He met her eyes. But tonight, maybe being stupid saves your life. Maybe refusing to quit is exactly what you need. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to weaken. The howling wind dropped to a lower pitch, and the snow fell less violently. Dawn was approaching. Philip checked his communicator. Rescue ship is 1 hour out. They'll be here soon. 1 hour. Lyria had to survive 1 more hour. She looked at her daughter, sleeping peacefully. She looked at this human who had given everything to keep them alive. She thought about the lullaby in his broken voice, about his refusal to accept impossible odds, about his stubborn, illogical, beautiful determination. Teach me something, Lyria said quietly. What? Teach me how to be unreasonable. Philip smiled, and in that smile Lyria saw the same fierce determination that had kept him fighting all night. You're already learning. You're still breathing, aren't you? Yes, Lyria said. I'm still breathing. Then you're doing it right, Philip said. Just keep doing that. 1 breath at a time. Don't think about the next hour. Just the next breath. So Lyria breathed. And breathed again. And again. 1 breath at a time, refusing to quit, learning to be as unreasonable as the human who would not let her die. The first light of dawn broke across Kale 7's frozen surface like a promise kept. The storm had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a landscape of pristine white snow that sparkled in the pale sunlight. The sky shifted from black to deep purple to a soft gray-blue, and for the first time in hours, the wind was almost silent. Philip had stayed awake the entire night. Lyria could see the exhaustion in his face, the dark circles under his eyes, but his hands remained steady as he monitored both patients through those final critical minutes. When his communicator chirped with an incoming signal, he answered immediately. This is Grant. I have 2 patients ready for evacuation. Both stable. There was a pause on the other end as if the speaker did not believe what they had heard. Then a voice responded in serif-accented galactic common. Stable? Our long-range scans showed critical life signs. We expected recovery of remains, not living patients. Well, you're getting living patients, Philip said. Better bring your full medical team. The mother has severe internal injuries that need immediate surgical attention. Within 10 minutes, Lyria heard the sound of engines overhead. A sleek Seraph medical vessel descended through the thinning clouds, its white hull gleaming in the morning light. It touched down 50 meters away, and a team of 6 Seraph medical personnel rushed out, carrying emergency equipment. The lead physician, a tall Seraph male with the traditional healer's markings on his face, reached their shelter first. He stopped short when he saw Lyria and Neva, his eyes widening in shock. "Impossible," he breathed. "The readings we received showed terminal status. How are they alive?" "Because someone decided impossible was not good enough," Lyria said weakly, looking at Philip. The medical team immediately began their work, scanning both patients and connecting them to more advanced monitoring equipment. The lead physician studied the readings on his display, then looked at Philip with something close to disbelief. "You stabilized a ruptured abdominal artery with field equipment?" he asked. "Best I could do with what I had," Philip replied. "The internal bleeding should have killed her hours ago. What medications did you use?" Philip listed the treatments he had administered. The Seraph physician listened, his expression growing more amazed with each item. "These are combat medic techniques," the physician said. "Primitive by modern standards but effective. You kept her metabolic systems active through sheer force of will and basic chemistry." He paused, studying Philip with new respect. "You are the human salvage worker who sent the distress signal?" "That's me." "You have training in emergency medicine?" "Former military medic. 12 years, Frontier Defense Corps." The physician nodded slowly, then turned to his team. "Prepare both patients for transport. Full trauma protocols. And someone get this human medical attention. He is injured and suffering from exposure." "I'm fine," Philip protested. "You are bleeding through your jacket and your core temperature is 2 degrees below safe levels," the physician said firmly. "You will be treated." They loaded Lyria onto a medical stretcher, and she reached out to grab Philip's hand as they moved her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved us both." "Just doing what anyone should do," Philip said. "No," Lyria said, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had. "What you did was far beyond that. You gave us everything you had." They carried her toward the ship, and Neva, now awake and alert, was brought along beside her. The little girl looked around with wide eyes, still wrapped in the thermal blanket Philip had given her. When she saw Philip, she smiled. "The singing man," Neva said in her small voice. Philip smiled back. "Hey there, little one. You feeling better?" Neva nodded, then looked at her mother. "Mama is going to be okay?" "Your mama is going to be fine," Philip assured her. "These doctors are going to take good care of both of you." Inside the medical ship, the Seraph team worked with incredible efficiency. They had Lyria connected to advanced life support systems within minutes, and one of the physicians was already preparing surgical equipment to repair her internal injuries properly. The lead physician approached Philip, who was sitting on a medical bench while a nurse treated his shoulder wound. "I have been a trauma physician for 30 years, the doctor said quietly. "I have never seen anyone survive injuries like hers for that long with such minimal treatment. The fact that she is alive is—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Miraculous." "Humans don't really believe in miracles," Philip said. "We just don't give up easy." "I am beginning to understand that," the physician replied. He studied Philip for a long moment. "Why did you do this? You risked your life for strangers. Your own species does not even have established ties with the Seraph. There was no political benefit, no reward, no logical reason to help." Philip shrugged, wincing as the nurse finished sealing his wound. "Did not need a reason. They needed help. I could give it. That was enough." The physician shook his head slowly. "The galaxy does not work that way. Resources are finite. Lives must be weighed against cost. What you did was inefficient by any standard calculation." "Good thing I'm bad at math," Philip said with a slight smile. Later, as the medical ship prepared to depart, Lyria, now stabilized and resting in a proper medical bed, asked to speak with Philip one more time. The doctors allowed it, though they insisted on keeping it brief. Philip stood beside her bed, looking uncomfortable in the clean medical bay after spending all night in the storm. Lyria studied his face, memorizing it. "I need you to understand something," she said. "Before tonight I thought I knew what strength was. I thought the Seraph were weak because our bodies are fragile. I thought species like the Verilyn or the Thane were strong because they are physically powerful." "You're not weak," Philip said. "I know that now," Lyria said. "Because you taught me that strength is not about what your body can endure. It is about what your spirit refuses to surrender." She reached into a small pouch that the medical team had recovered from the crash site, her personal belongings. From it, she drew out a small crystal no larger than a thumb, that glowed with a soft silver light. "This is a memory crystal," Lyria explained. "In Seraph culture we give them to people who have changed our lives fundamentally. It holds a recording of a significant moment." She pressed it into Philip's hand. "I recorded the lullaby you sang to Neva, so you will always remember that you did not just save 2 lives tonight. You changed how one person sees the entire universe." Philip looked at the crystal, then closed his fingers around it. "I'll keep it safe. And I will keep the memory of you safe," Lyria said. "I will tell everyone what you did. I will tell them that humans are not just another species trying to find their place in the galaxy. You are the species that reminds the rest of us what we are supposed to be." The medical ship lifted off an hour later, carrying Lyria and Neva toward a full trauma center 3 systems away. Philip stood in the snow and watched it disappear into the sky. Then he gathered his equipment, collapsed his shelter, and began the walk back to his salvage station. The small seraph crystal hung from a cord around his neck, warm against his chest. Within a week, the story had spread across the sector. A human salvage worker who walked through a killer storm to save 2 strangers. Who gave up his own safety to keep them alive. Who sang a lullaby in a language he did not know because it was what they needed. The story was told in Seraph medical schools as an example of determination over technology. It was discussed in galactic forums as evidence that humanity brought something unique to the stars. It spread through colonies and stations, growing with each retelling. And at the heart of every version was the same truth. The galaxy ran on logic and efficiency and acceptable losses. But sometimes, the universe needed a species too stubborn to accept that some lights should go out. Sometimes it needed someone unreasonable enough to fight for lives that the numbers said were already lost. Sometimes it needed humans. Philip never sought recognition for what he did. He returned to his salvage work, to his quiet isolation among the asteroids and abandoned stations. But the crystal remained around his neck, a reminder that one night in a frozen storm, being unreasonable had been exactly the right thing to be. And somewhere in a Seraph medical facility, Lyria recovered fully. She held her daughter close and taught her about the human who had refused to let them die. She taught Neva that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the greatest strength of all was simply refusing to give up on someone when the entire universe said you should. The lullaby, sung in a rough human voice, became part of their family story. A reminder that compassion needs no translation, and that hope requires no permission. Just the stubborn refusal to accept that some lives are not worth saving.